So yeah, thanks for coming today. So yeah, my assessment is very different to Craig's. I do have some stuff on the topic actually. I can show you, but this is a talk I've done years ago, and I've actually not changed it very much since. Because I think this is really fundamental, and this is why I wanted to bring it back now and kind of revive some of those reports that I built 8 years ago, 9 years ago, and actually show that those same storytelling principles still apply now. It's still fundamental to the whole analytics process. And actually, even with Copilot and things like that, it's not going to be this kind of visualization storytelling. It's actually quite good at text, it's quite good at commentary and narratives and giving you some of that, so you can absolutely use it. But in terms of the visualization, in terms of doing all of this actual storytelling with data, I think us humans still have a job in this space, which is good. So yeah, so my background is I'm actually from I came into the data analytics space through Excel, through Power Query, Power Pivot. I'm a chartered accountant by background, so I spent the first decade of my career working for the big four and some of the big banks in London, and then moved into went to a company called Altius from financial modeling, acquired by Avanade in 2020. So I now work for Avanade, which is the Microsoft arm of Accenture, basically. 80% of Accenture, 20% by Microsoft. So I work at the Centre of Excellence team, advise kind of large clients on mid-market zones as well, on fabric, governance, security, things about fabric as a data platform, and migration, all of these similar things to advanced analytics. And so yeah, so really, I do have actually, if you want to check it out, I'll show you this as well. I do have a website. And if we, so just rishisuppra.com, and this is just revamped this recently. And what's useful here is I've got a portfolio, and actually some of the sessions I was thinking of doing today, I was going to do this credit risk modeling, but you can actually go and see this online. And some of the reports that I'm going to show today are actually here as well, not all of them. But I've started building a few of those reports and putting them up here as well, so you can go and see some of those examples that we're going to look at today. And I am between you and pizza, so I probably won't show all of them. Cool. Okay, so in terms of what we're going to look at today, so it's really kind of looking at why do we want to consider storytelling, and what does it mean? What are the types of stories that we can tell with data? What's the type of report build or audiences that we could build for, and how to build a data visualization using these kind of principles. So firstly, what is a story? And this is something I just typed into Google. What is a story? And I think this was the first thing that came up. So a story is the telling of an event, true or fictional, in such a way that the listener experiences or learns something just by the fact that you heard a story. It's a means of transferring information, experience, attitude, or point of view. And every story has a teller and a listener. That's an interesting definition, because especially this bit here where it's talking about transferring information, experience, attitude, or point of view. And I think that's why people are quite nervous about telling stories with data. Because they're like, well, you've got data, data's data. Surely as a BI professional, an analyst, I should just present the numbers and let them speak for themselves. Let the person interpreting it understand what that data is telling them. And also, that data changes, that story changes every month. So how can I tell a story with the data and have reports that are useful then for that particular period, not about the next period? And all sorts of reasons why you might come up with it and say, actually, I'm better off just presenting the data exactly as it is and not kind of putting my own lens on it or my own view on it, because it can be risky, if you like. And I can see the perception of that. And I think it's this attitude and point of view. And hopefully you'll see as we go through the session why that's not necessarily the case. And actually why you need a story. Data can tell any story. That's the whole point, right? We see this is why it's so hard to see what's true. Because you can put any lens on it, live statistics, right? And we've seen so much of that in the world these days. So it's our job as analysts to actually tell the right story. What does that data? What does the business want? What do our stakeholders? What do they need to know from this data, from this report, that we can then tell the story about? So actually, that's why it becomes even more important. So I've kind of touched a little bit on this, but here's some scientific research to back it up. Stories are really innate to how we communicate as human beings. Has anyone read a book called Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari? Yeah, brilliant book. He talks in there about stories, about how that has basically made us the most powerful species on the planet. Why we're the top of the food chain? Because most other animals communicate in tribes of like 10 different people. We invent stories about religion, nations, corporations, money, all these things that are just made up. But these stories are what bind people together. They're what allow us to communicate and integrate with people who don't live in our tribe or anywhere near us. So actually stories are really, really powerful, and they have been for millennia. And this is something 22 times more likely to remember facts when they're presented as a story than when they're presented as. That's from the Forbes article from a couple of years ago. And this is the science behind it, right? It kind of activates other areas of your brain compared to presenting facts. So what that means is that it's going to drive better adoption of your reports. People are going to remember the numbers. And look, I've been there so many times where I've built reports and I've gone, and built reports that go out for the whole organization and 10,000 people, and I've spent months and months and months building the report. I go back in there a couple of months later, and the use of and it's quite heartbreaking. But the point is, that's probably why it's those reports that try to be all things to all people that don't end up getting the adoption. They're not telling any particular story. They're just presenting generic information in a way that people don't really engage with. So really, that's why we want to really tell the stories with data. So what makes a good story? Now, if you think about any story that's like Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet, right? If the story of Romeo and Juliet was there was a nice couple, they went for dinner, had a bottle of wine, got married. Okay. It's not really going to be much of an engaging story. What makes the story is the tension. Now, okay, so how do we apply it to data visualization and reporting? Well, actually, this tension is the with or between characters, the ChatGPT image I generated today. But and actually, who are the characters? The characters are your audience, your stakeholders that are consuming that report. What is the tension? The tension is the business problem you're trying to solve, or the decision that you need to make. So actually, it does in data visualization and reporting. Potentially there's more tension when your performance is not so good. Maybe. I'm not suggesting that you go and make your performance bad in order to tell a better story. Actually, the story doesn't change. What you're trying to solve, that business problem or the decision you're trying to make, is regardless of whether the performance is good or bad. So actually, the tension is always there, and that's what you need to build your narrative and your arc around building the story. So now we look at the kind of different types of data stories. So there's three main types of data stories. And I'm actually going to relate this back to academia, because I think there's a lot of parallels there. So I went to LSE in London, did philosophy and economics, and lots and lots of obscure texts. Right? So you have to try and understand all of these, Aristotle and Kant and all of these other things. So actually, the first type of comprehension that you get around this is for yourself. You go in there and you take notes. So that's the audience, it's self-exploration, you're finding patterns, you're finding areas of interest, and for Power BI, similar things, right? You just grab the data in, look and explore it, see what kind of patterns and trends. That's the kind of audience, and that's the kind of notes type reports that you can build. And that's a good place to start. But what you wouldn't do, like in an exam, when you graduate or when you're at the end of the year, you wouldn't just take some highlighter of your notes and hand it in. You could do, some people do that, but you wouldn't get a very good grade. Actually, what you say is they say, well, okay, you've done all of this research. Now here's an exam question. Go and answer this exam question and apply all of that learning that you did to that. And now what you have to do is kind of make some arguments, and you have to guide the reader, in this case, or the viewer of a report or listener of a story through that narrative. through that arc to say, okay, here's what I've learned, here's what the facts are, here's what the analysis is of it, here's what it means, and here's how it relates to that exam question. And so this is this kind of guided analysis exploration. And so, yeah, so again, through the university example, yeah, this is, we have an exam question to answer. So now we have to structure our analysis in a way that makes more sense for an examiner. And we have to make it easy for the examiner, right? Because actually they're lazy. To make it as easy as possible for them to give us the marks. And this is something we'll come onto a little bit later as well about how to build this one, because this is what we're going to focus on. But also, say I graduate and I get approached by a book publisher, I didn't, that says, right, we want to make this timeless philosophy knowledge accessible to children. And then you say, okay, so now again, I can't just take my essay, as good as it might be, I need to distill those messages up. And you can see where this is going. This is your executive. And you can see with the execs and children. Yeah, exactly. So execs and children, very similar type of communication style. You just need the highlights. You just need, here's the numbers, here's the insights, here's what it means. They will trust, hopefully, that the data behind it is accurate. This is where you have a more explanatory type of presentation. So the purpose of that is to understand the recommendations or the actions. And here you have annotations, you have bookmarks, you have some visuals that you really explain what they are. So it's very explanatory. There's not really, you could have a drawn on functionality there, but they probably won't use it. So this kind of report is much more than kind of traditionally what people have done in PowerPoint and just take a screenshot. These days you could have a co-pilot smart narrative do it for you and make sure you highlight the key points there. And if you think about this, so an example that I've taken from Colness Bauman-Nathalie, who's one of the kind of world leaders in the kind of storytelling with data. She said, gives the example of looking for pearls and oysters. So she's, in this first example, you're going around and you're opening up all of those oysters, going around digging out, see what's interesting, see where the pearls are. In the second one, you're guiding people to the right. So, kind of giving them a map, giving them instructions and guidance and the way to do it. In the third one, you just give them the pearl, right? So I think that's the way to kind of really think about, again, different audiences, different types of storytelling, different types of audiences and reports that you want to build. So I think we're going to focus on this middle one, because I think the first one's fairly obvious, and the last one, yeah, once you've got the essay and you've got that structure, I think it's what you need to put out. So then now we come to that third part of how do we tell a story. And I'm going to show some examples here as well, and actually some data. So we've got 7 key steps. Again, I'll show some examples with it. So the first one is that you need to familiarize yourself with the assessment criteria. Know what you're being asked against, know what good looks like. Again, very similar to that kind of academic example. The second is know your audience. Know what they want from this report. And again, that's really important, because if you try and build something that's all people particularly well. So know your audience is a key one. Then we want to make the insights obvious. And again, we'll look at some examples. We want to pick your arguments, coming back to that kind of essay type structure. We want to argue points rather than just state them. And I'll explain the difference. And the fifth one is we want to have a clear user journey. And thinking about that whole user experience. It's not just visualization, it's everything that goes with it. The performance of the report, the look and feel, the color, everything else. That experience of what we need to build for that user journey. The sixth is simplicity. We need to make sure we simplify so that what you want to stand out does stand out. And lastly, we want to guide attention in the right way, using something called pre-attentive attributes. So we'll have a look at some of that as well. So let's start with familiarizing yourself with the assessment criteria. So here again, I'm going to use the same kind of example as academia, right? So this is an example of an exam grid. It's probably quite difficult to read, especially kind of at the back, but what it's basically saying is you go through different assessment objectives, and for each one, is it just, is it adequate, is it clear, or is it convincing? And those criteria, kind of the skills that you're assessed against, move from can someone basically recall that to can they evaluate arguments? Can they analyze and evaluate an argument to present against, example or something? So those are the higher level skills. And for data visualization, this is the basic. Every report should answer these 4 questions. My performance good or bad? How good or bad? Why? And what can I do about it? Now, if you actually looked at a Power BI report, most Power BI reports, they'd probably fail on at least 1, but probably all 4. So, like in terms of does it actually answer those questions of performance. It's not about making data look pretty. It's not about you have to be able to know to be able to answer those questions. You have to be able to communicate whether your performance is good or bad, not just what it is. It's not good, it's not bad. How and why is it good or bad? What's the reasons that's driving that performance? Why is it different to how it was last time? And then there's the kind of what can you do about it? And this is where you might need to put in maybe some operational data. So, yeah. And then the other things. So, does the report tell me what I need to know? That was the third thing that we looked at there. Does it look good? And again, people will look, oh, you judge a report by its looks, right? It does need to look good. And is it easy to use and understand? And the whole purpose, if you take one thing away from this entire session, it's this, soundbite. The goal of data visualization is to reduce cognitive load. That is why you're visualizing data in the first place. That's why you're not just giving people. Because with a spreadsheet of numbers, even though finance people love it, or they say they love it, actually, it's very hard for them to try and really spot the patterns and understand the drivers of it. So there's a lot of cognitive load there. So the more you can work to reducing that cognitive load, that's what data visualization is aimed at. That's why data visualization as a concept exists. It's to help reduce that cognitive load. So all of these things, actually, everything we're going to look at, it all comes back to this. And if you think about every point we cover and then think, does that help reduce cognitive load? It'll be, yep. That's why we're doing all of this stuff. So bear that in mind as we go through even the rest of the session and some of the reports that we're going to look at. Next thing is know your audience. And actually, I'm going to come back to this. So I want to show you some data. So this is it's not a very exciting example, which is actually why I picked it, but it's a real life example. So I was working for a client. Again, this is going back a long time, but this is some data that we've got around construction, build activities. So can people see it? Yeah, cool. Okay. So we've got for different dates, we've got work packages. So this might be, a particular set of activities and a particular set of materials associated with that. So, you might be building an oil rig or, something like that, and you've got some materials associated with it. And for each one of these work packages, this whole process. So this is big construction. So it needs to have a look at the design docs, all these stages, and you've got dates against each of these stages. So planned and actual for design docs, requests for information. You've got to go out to vendors and suppliers to be able to build that work package order. Request for information, plans, forecast, actual, issue request for information, bid return, technical evaluation, commercial evaluation, request for quotation, formal quotation that you need to get from here, planned, forecast, actual, approved, and then complete the request for division, issue the purchase order. And then again, you've got the dates for the planned, forecast, actual, and then you've got this at the end here, required on site. So when do you need this work package to be on site and kind of ready to go? And what is the current ETA? People, contractors, materials, and all the rest of it. does anyone have any idea? Like, what would you do if someone got this data? Any initial thoughts? Timeline? I mean, that's quite messy. Also, you get this data every month, right? So now this is the August data. So this is on against August. Maybe there's different work packages, but these are probably the same work packages. So yeah, I mean, this is a real example, right? So I looked at this and I put some data into Power Query and I started, putting. I think I put it in the data model and then I had about 300 user relationships on the date table. So like, all right, where do I go from here? And so I went back to the stakeholders and said, look, let's go through. And this is an example that I use for almost every report that I build. I don't build reports these days, but community examples, work examples. Actually, sorry, this is the wrong example, but it's the same scoping template. Let me show you one for the procurement one. So the first thing here, so it's a very simple kind of one-pager table. So we say, okay, firstly, who is the audience for this? Who are the users of this report? And specifically, what do they want to know? And then for each area, what are the key questions they want answered? So this is a conversation you have with them. And then we say, okay, what are the key KPIs and measures that will help you answer that question? And what do you need to do in filter by answer that? Now, obviously, we're all data people here, so you recognize that as facts and dimensions, but this is a non-technical conversation. This is just a conversation with stakeholders to understand what their pain points are, what they want to know about, and what kind of data they need, and at a very high level, what kind of data source is used. So when I actually did go to the client and speak to them about that, what I realized they were really interested in was actually just those last two comments. What's the flow? Which is the difference between the ETA and the required on site, i.e., what is the end impact of this on my actual work plan? So and also, because you get this data each month, they wanted to know which ones have become delayed now. So there might be some that are delayed for whatever reason, they're working on it, and there's probably very little they can do again at this particular point in time. But if there's something that's just become delayed, so last month there was no growth, it's due to be scheduled on time or before time, and now suddenly it's due to be delivered after the ETA, after the required on-site date, sorry, then that's a problem. That's something they could do something about now. So that's what they really were interested in. So what stage have they become delayed at? Which work packages have become delayed within the last month, or which stage have they become delayed at? And how delayed overall are the packages at each stage? So kind of also where are the bottlenecks in this process? Yep. Good question? No. Cool. So this was a really useful exercise then, again, to really think about that audience. So so that's the kind of get to the pain point, understand your audience, get to the pain points, and then we want to make the insights obvious. And I'll show you the report in a second. So again, taking some ideas from storytellingwithdata.com, Colin Lisbaum and Laflick. So what we think about here then is we say, okay, from that scoping template, there's two things we can do. So it's always a really good place to start with it. So the first thing we can do is say, okay, this is giving us our facts and dimensions. We understand how to structure the staffing data model in order to be able to answer that, because we need to get these measured and we need to do and filter these things. So there are things like work packages, there was things like that. And then the second thing is storyboarding. So again, the way you can do storyboarding is by kind of really thinking about the arguments, the key points, and making sure that they jump out at you. And so we can kind of have a bit of a grid layout of our report. And we can do this with Post-it notes. I know it's very easy to put stuff in Power BI and just put some visuals on the page and show that to people. But you're still then constrained by the technology, you're still thinking about the visuals, and you go into a level of detail that's just not good or required at this stage. It's like when you ask your stakeholders, what do you want to see? And they say, I want to see a line chart, I want to see a bar chart. It's just the wrong level of conversation to be having at that point. That's your job to figure out how to present it. What you want to know is what are the insights? And these could be almost titles for your charts. right? To say, okay, this many work packages have been delayed this month. This is our total number of work packages, total number of stage. This is the total value of those work packages, whatever those are. What are the key insights that we want? And this is the kind of people read in a Z layout. So think about where they're going to start on that journey and where they're going to end. And ending with this kind of what can I do about it? What's the end insights? Starting with what's the top level insights that I want to get, and going into that journey of why. So this was, actually I've got an actual picture there that I don't think this was the real example, but close enough. So here we've got statements and arguments, right? Again, sorry, this is a picture of some very small images, but we can see here we've got the number of work packages in total, and I'm going to go through in a minute what the difference between these are, arguments and in detail an argument. So what number of work packages delayed in the latest month and prior month, the number and the detail argument, number of work packages which have become delayed, and then we have the detail. So work packages now delayed by delayed time category, or work packages currently delayed by delayed time category. So more than a week, 1 to 2 weeks, 1 month to 2 months, whatever else it is. That's what I meant. And then by stage, so all those stages, and now delayed by stage. So this was the kind of, again, non-technical exercise, something you can do with stakeholders. Helps you to then kind of, you can always reposition these, prioritize them. The brainstorming to come up with all the things that you want to be able to answer those questions. And if we have a look now at the report, and so the other thing as well, just quickly, the other idea is to come up with this big idea for what the report is showing you. And so for this particular example, this is the story that doesn't change, even if the numbers in there change. Right? So this is what I mean when I say, actually, we might have no work package delayed. Great. That doesn't change the story. The story is the big idea. The story is this many work packages worth this amount are now delayed compared to the previous period. And these newly delayed packages are stuck at this procurement stage for which this person is responsible. If you go and speak to this person, because we have that. Work package is owned by this, or this stage is owned by this person. They have an ETA date later for which the corresponding activity is due to start. The total delay on these packages are this number of days. So now this is the idea that it's giving them the insight, giving them what they need to know, giving them something they can do something about. So let me show you that report. So if I open it up, there's a procurement example. So actually the first page of the report is actually just the scoping template, because actually it helps people to know what questions this report answers or what's in there. We've then got the delay analysis as an area, and this is where we can then see the packages delayed latest month, delayed prior month, and then the difference between them is the ones that are now become delayed. So which those packages are that now become delayed, and then the value of those packages now delayed, and the total delay in days. So by default, we're looking at this overall. We could look at it by a particular area of construction, which is completely made up. And so now we then start to have some detail that we can slice and dice and focus on particular work packages that we want to look at. So now we want to look at, say, the ones that have got a decrease of 1 to 3 months float. And then we can cost filter and say, I want to look at those that are at this particular stage. And then underneath, we've got a table that shows us those particular ones that we're filtering by. And it shows us the work package, the last completed stage, for the activity, the ETA, the ROS, the float, the difference between the two, the previous float, and the variance. So now we're bringing in all of that data, and you can imagine how hard this would be to do. So try and figure that all out, and the lookups, and all the rest of it that people would have to do. I don't think they actually showed me what they were doing before, but it'd be interesting to see. And here we've got then some context as well. So we've got the work packages, actual versus planned. It's a bullet chart, and then cumulative procurement tasks and planned over time. And if we have a look at the kind of data model for here, we've had to build. So we've just got let me have a look at the tables. Our procurement data is for each date. So we've got 2 dates loaded in there, work package number, and then we've got the planned and actual dates. We've got the actual data in there. But then for each one, we've got some calculated columns, right, to work out the float variance or the float variance time category and things like that. So probably could have done its measures as well, to be fair. But wanted to have this as the kind of keep the DAX really simple and just have these kind of attributes of the work package to make that. And then we've got the measures there. So quite a simple data model. And we can see there we've got date, procurement data, and the calculated fields which do all the lookup. So you have a kind of disconnected table that has, say you have number of days, you have a float, and then you have a table that has upper bound and lower bound. So if it's less than 1 and greater than 1 and less than 30, then the category is between 1 day and 1 month. And that's then kind of a lookup that you can do. So you can do that in Power Query, or you can do it in DAX. Again, just using maybe a calculated column and a disconnected table. So I think that's kind of what I did here with that example. I think I could probably actually just show it very quickly if people want to see. Yep, so these are calculated columns. Yep, so float time category. Again, probably not best practice, probably better to use DAX to do stuff like this. But I think in this case, the data was complex enough that I just wanted to keep this really simple. DAX really simple. So looks it up the time filter, filters your float time categories, which is your lookup table. The start date's less than the procurement date, and it's less than the end number of days. And then it calculates the corresponding one that got the lookup. So it's basically like a lookup in Excel with a 1 at the end, or true at the end. Cool. So that's kind of the the big idea. And then that's the example of the dashboard that we just looked at. So the next thing is pick your arguments. So here is where I want to talk about an argument, the difference between a statement and an argument. So a statement is a fact, and it's saying something like, we sold $1,000, 1,000 units last month. Okay, great. Now, is that good or bad? Depends. How many you sold the month before? How many you sold last year? What was your budget in a month? What was, what was it? How many employees have you got? Which region? So there's so many different questions to be able to evaluate that performance. And that's the difference between statements and arguments. An argument is a statement with context. And all of those things are context to evaluate the statement, to evaluate whether that number is good or bad. So when we say don't just tell, argue, it's talking about providing this context. So this is an example of saying, okay, well, you've got revenue, but rather than just showing the revenue number, because 1.54 million doesn't mean anything by itself, we say, well, the prior year was 1.16 and it's gone up by 374K. So now you're giving an indication and visually an indication with a triangle to say we've got an increase in revenue. Waterfall charts are good for doing this. So the waterfall chart doesn't quite work in exactly the same way as you think it should in Power BI. Like for me, this is how waterfall chart should work. You've got a value at one point in time, a value at another point in time, and then you've got what breakdown. If you actually just put a waterfall chart, it just shows you the total variance and then variance at the end. So I've raised this to Microsoft a number of times, and I don't know why they've never thought about doing it differently. It's not how it works in Excel, by the way. But yeah, that's really useful for the context. Then you're saying actually what's made up the difference between 2 points in time or two particular things. We'll look at an example of that as well. Bullet graphs. So rather than just a bar chart, this should really be a native visual, a custom visual. But like a bar chart, okay, it shows technology has the highest volume. Great. If technology is your biggest area, most of your product technology, then that's obvious. Or if Europe your biggest region, it's obvious that that's going to be the biggest one. So again, to provide context to actually, is that actually good or bad or better or worse than expected, we need to have some kind of context line there. So that's why a bullet graph is actually probably better than just a bar chart, where you show a reference line to say this was prior year or this was budgeted. So now visually we can see, even though technology was biggest, actually, it was much more than whatever that reference line is. So maybe, furniture, not so much. And by the way, these examples are from this thing called visual vocabulary. So yeah, this is when I did this session, 2018. So it's this stuff has been around for a long time, right? So visual vocabulary is something that I think Andy Kriebel did with Tableau or Financial Times. I've done a visual vocabulary. There's probably other examples of this much more recent, but I did check this link yesterday, and I think it still does work. The guy's still around in the data space, Jason Thomas, and yeah, that's the kind of, you could just Google that visual times visual vocabulary, and it shows different types of visualizations and what they're good at. Scatter plots are really good for context because you've got two measures, so automatically each measure is a context for the other. So thinking about a finance example again, you've got cost income ratio. So you could say, okay, what's your cost as a proportion of your revenue? And then as context, you can have revenue. Because what you're saying then is, even though you might have a small region that has, a really high cost income ratio, if it is low on the revenue side, this side of the scale, it's not probably contributing to it overall. Whereas if you've got one that's even medium, but it's a really high revenue, then that cost income ratio will be that overall. So it's really useful to be able to provide context as another measure. So when you've got two different measures, line and column, obviously the line might be a volume indicator, for example, or percentage indicator that again provides to what's driving it. So, it could be number of employees, and then you're kind of seeing, okay, well, yes, we know we've got more revenue because we've got loads more employees. But actually, if that's growing, growing above the growth, then we can use generating more revenue. So you can start to again provide some of that context. Heat maps. So again, rather than just a table, visually indicate with conditional formatting. And spark lines. I mean, yeah, I think you could do a lot more of this natively. Again, this is an old presentation, but this was a custom visual KPI card back in the day that kind of had the icons and then spark lines in there as well. So you can do spark lines with SVGs and stuff a bit more natively now. And slopes. So actually, if all you're interested in is the difference between 2 points, you don't need to have a big logo hide. Actually, if you just want to know between this date and this date, has it gone up, has it gone down, and relatively to all the others, how much have they gone up and down? Actually, just a slope line with just 2 points, which you can just do as a line graph with 2 points, or use a slope visual. Yeah. Which one, sorry? Comet. I'm not coming across that one.
Kind of like a bar chart.
Yeah.
So you go from.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Okay. Okay, I'll bring it up. Colors, a comet chart. Okay, I'll have a look at it online. We'll have a look at that. But yeah, slope chart's something I've seen used before as well. And yeah, use AI to do the hard work for you. And again, this was before Copilot, right? So this was looking at key influencers, where it can actually look at your data and indicate what are the key things that are driving the number. So and sometimes it gave you good results, sometimes not so much, similar to Copilot, to be fair. But actually now, yes, as long as your data model is built well, Copilot as well can do a lot of that. Smart narrative visual in Copilot for Power BI is really, really good. And if you point it at the right visuals and you give it the right prompt, you don't have to just use the default prompt, which is give me an executive summary or give me a bulleted list of insights. You can actually write a detailed prompt in there and point it at which visuals. It will give you some really good insights into it. And actually for commentary, dynamic commentary and stuff like that, really, really good. Or yeah, without Copilot, key influencers, stuff like that as well. Okay, next one is have a clear user journey. So here we're saying, let's think about the whole user experience. And one of the techniques that's used for kind of root cause analysis for lean manufacturing and also used by kids all around the world is this 5 whys technique, right? So you ask a question and then you say why, and then you keep asking why until you get to a level of detail that makes sense or until the kid gets bored. So let's start again. Let's use this for examples. It's a useful framework to think about that user journey of where people are going from that initial high level insights or performance to recommendations or this. So we say, well, why are we not selling as much as we did last month? And you say, well, we sold less than expected in our London store. Okay. Why did we sell less in our London store? Well, the store was closed 3 days in a month. Okay. Why is that? Well, we didn't have enough stock. Why is that? Well, our supply shipment from supplier Y was delayed. And now suddenly we're able to get into those answers. Now, obviously, some of those reasons could change. And this is where, again, Copilot might be able to be a bit more helpful in trying to, pick out different things. But if we've got a kind of story arc or a couple of story arcs that we could think about these 5 whys, then we can really start to understand how to go from that top level as to we're not selling as much as we did, as to what's driving that and why, and what could we do about it. So yeah, allow these to start at a high level, be consistent, and use the text and tooltips to explain. So this is where you've got functionalities like drill through. So go through from a high level, drill through into the detail. Report page tooltips. And again, some of those might be more different and better in the different situations. And in 1 month, it might be actually that you use this drill through more, another month you might use another drill through. So it's good to have the options there because, again, the overall story doesn't change. The overall arc doesn't change. How you navigate through that to get to your insights and your recommendations might change. So you want to have that this bit to be as flexible as possible for different journeys. Yep, chart junk as well. So get rid of all the noise. We don't have 3D visuals like this in Power BI, I don't think. So I don't know where this is from. So yeah, maybe we do. Yeah, I imagine custom visuals people have probably added a lot. But yeah, obviously we want to keep it clean and easy to read. I think actually one of the things as well is you don't need to have. You see a lot of charts with lots and lots of data and lots of data points and axes. And actually, you don't need all of that because if you want to show the individual data points, if you're interested in those data points, then show data labels. If you're interested in a trend, have it as an axis and no data labels, right? So again, it's just working out. If you have everything, it's just going to be too much noise, and there's going to be too many things to look at. Okay, so now we've got a game, like interaction with these things. Yeah, everyone ready for a game? Okay, so raise your hand once you've completed the exercise. So count the threes. I should set a timer. I haven't got my phone on me. Okay, go on. Oh, you haven't got it. So? Okay. Well, we've got 10, 7, 12. I'm pretty sure it's 10, actually. No? Pretty sure it's 10. 8, 9, 10. Okay. Yeah, maybe. Actually, no, you're right. I think you're right. Okay. Anyway, look, you get the point. Right, now count the threes. Easier. Yeah. Cool. And you can see where we're going with this. Now count the threes. 10. Yeah. This one is 10 yet. Yeah. So you can see how, as long as you guide attention to what's important, it becomes a lot easier to get those insights. And what we've done there, again, we're talking about reducing cognitive load. The cognitive load on this was much less than the second example and much less than the first example. So this is how we're now making those important details stand out. And now then we want to visualize that. So which numbers occur the most? So yeah, and okay, this is probably a bad example, but pie charts can work. I've seen this come up on LinkedIn actually in the last few days, right? I think pie charts can work if you want to show proportions as a whole, but when you've got 2 or 3 categories, right, and it's clearly labeled and it's just easy to see. If you've got more than that and you're having to go back to the legend and stuff like that, there's just no way for you to really see here. And even if you had data labels, maybe, yeah, I mean, there's no way to know here because the numbers are so close together as well. It's the difference between 7 and 8. There's no way you're going to be able to pick that up on here. So people say, okay, well, I won't use a pie chart then. I'll use a tree map. And they're not necessarily any better at all, because especially for the smaller numbers, you can't see them. They'll just get hidden up. What was that? Yes, yes. But still, can you really see the difference between those? Oh yeah, because you said it's sorted. Right, right. Okay, fine. Yeah, you actually need to make sure it's sorted. I don't know if it is by default actually. Yep, yep. So they put them into bars, and humans are much better at seeing length and measuring length relatively to each other than they are proportions. So this makes it easier. So this is actually our tornado chart or funnel chart, I think. You're kind of showing each one, but again, it's quite difficult because they're got different starting points, and you can't exactly really illustrate that lead. Actually, this is actually meant for going from a process from the top to the bottom. This is what it's actually designed for. Okay, so now there's a bar chart. So now we've got them all aligned, and we've got an axis, so we can see that these two were 10, but we're now going back and forth between the legend. We've got lots of colors there, and cognitive load is still playing a factor here. Now we've got some data labels because we're actually interested in data points. Again, much easier now to really see what's going on, much less cognitive load. And now this is the one where you've got, very little cognitive load, because again, what you're really highlighting is the insights, and you can have a dynamic title in Power BI to say these ones occurred the most frequently, or this was the highest performing one. And everything else is gray. And actually, that's a really good data visualization technique is to use gray as your base color for everything, and then use color to guide attention rather than. And I know people say, well, I need to use all my corporate colors. And it's like, well, yes, you can do. You can use these as your corporate colors rather than red or whatever. And that's fine. But actually think about gray first and then think about layering those on top in terms of what you want people to focus on in a visual. And again, I know people sometimes are a little bit nervous about that because they're like, well, I just want to present the data. But again, this is now thinking about, well, what do you want people to take away from this graph? What should that title be that's an argument, not just a statement of what is showing? And the color is an example of a pre-attentive attribute. And there's a few others. So size, again, to guide attention. So people will be guided towards things that are bigger, and they will, that's a way to kind of then pick out to guide attention to those are the most important points, so like bubble charts, for example. Spatial grouping. So again, scatter plots, thinking about where things sit. One of the things I do with a scatter plot is you can set an image behind it. So put a quadrant. Quadrant graphs are brilliant, right, for showing things in the top right-hand corner, top left, bottom right, because they have a significance, whatever you're measuring against, high revenue, high cost, whatever else it is, right? Like, so, spatial grouping is a way to really then, a good way of really doing that. Orientation, and length and width. So just to recap on those, telling stories, so you've got familiarize yourself with the assessment criteria, know your audience, make the insights obvious. So obviously we've got the assessment criteria. Is your performance good or bad? How good or bad? Why? What can you do about it? Use a scoping template or something like that. Pick the audience, identify the business questions, make the insights obvious, and pick your arguments. So add context to your numbers. And that context is what's going to tell the story. Have a clear user journey. Think about the 5 whys. Think about going from those top insights into what can I do about it and why. And keep it simple. Remove chart junk. Keep everything with the colors, and think about gray, and then using color appropriately, and guide attention. Again, using those pre-attentive attributes. Make it fun. Yeah. And I think that was part of the user experience. Right? That's what I'm saying. The user experience is all about. It's got to look good. It's got to have the right user journey. It's got to be performant, right? Like if a report takes a minute to load a query, people are not going to be willing to use it. Yeah. So yeah, make it enjoyable. I think is part of some of these steps we've got here. And I think we're out of time for demos, but yeah, okay, that's fine. I mean, I showed one example anyway with a procurement example, but there's a few others, and yeah, I'm happy to show people if they want to have a look over a beer after this. Yeah, I've got some resources. I'll share the slides with Johnny. And yeah, feel free to keep in touch. And yeah, this is a topic, like I say, been interested for a long time. I used to build a lot of Power BI reports, and I do less so now, but I wanted to come back to this and really come up with those concepts. But yeah, questions?
When you're doing the requirements, yeah,
Mhm.
and you get to the point of, okay, what are how do we use that, communicate that with why that is. How about you start building it and I'll figure it out and then I'll keep telling you through the iteration. Do you have like a special technique in which you sort of prompt these people to think a little bit more of what they need?
Yeah, so it's really just thinking about what they're going to do with it, because people will ask you for reports and you're like, okay, what are you going to do with that report? And they find that really hard to answer. And that's probably a good indication that they don't need a report. So if they can answer the question about what they're going to do with it, then it's like, okay, well, how are you going to arrive at that decision about whether you do this or do this, or what actions you can take off it. So guiding it from action-driven decision making is a good way to be able to understand what context you need to be able to evaluate that performance. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. So let me show you an example very quickly, just to answer that. So this was something I did on really simple example on baby names, right? So this is the notes example. We just so literally the data set is probably the simplest data set you've ever seen. For each year, for each name, what was the rank? Right, baby names. And again, I did an example of this, and I don't think I've put this on my website yet, but basically I said, okay, who's the audience to this? And it's completely fictional, but I said it's people who are making personalized baby goods, right? So they want to know what the trends are in baby names. So the actual report was, again, looking at trends, what the top 5 names rank over time, right? Because they want to know what names they should put on their products. And you could pick any 2 years as a point. You've got the slope charts there. Which ones are decline? Which the names are the highest decline? Which should they start reducing production on? And then you've got the baby name comparison. And then you can pick some names. So let's see some names in the audience. So we had a Dan, didn't we? Dan or Daniel, maybe? Was it Dan? I don't know. Any other names you want to pick? Sorry? Ben. Yeah. Okay. So again, you get Ben or Benjamin, Ruben. So you can see now then it's showing those names that you're picking, and it's giving that, right? So this is an example where you don't need huge amounts of text to tell that story, because you're getting that interaction. What we did do with this though then is to say, okay, we've got bookmarks. I actually might have picked the wrong report, because I don't think, maybe I didn't have bookmarks on this one because I can't see them. Bookmarks. Yeah, sorry, Tony, here you go. So now this is where we then say, okay, rather than a PowerPoint deck, right, we have a copy of this chart, and then we have, sorry, let me just open up the pane again, sorry. You can see I don't use Power BI very much anymore. Things have changed. So, and then we have the stories behind these and the arguments. So there's a clear correlation between rank and sales in year. And so we can add the text as a narrative to explain things, or put things in titles for the charts. So I think having some kind of narrative, and again, I think Copilot narratives are good here as well. You can have bookmarks with while still keeping the interactivity. So you still have your core report that has the interactivity, allows people to explore. And then for the children's storybook version, for the exec audience, that's where you have bookmarks, where you have text with a visual to support the text. Does that help? So it depends on the audience is the question. Yep. Questions? Yeah. And those questions actually you have in the scoping template. I think they're actually I think it's quite a nice technique to actually say, because then, and that's why I put the scoping template as the first page, because then you can see which questions are answered. And then if they actually see the visuals that have the same questions, they know exactly what questions are being answered by those visuals. You can smell the pizza, can't you? Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you. Thank you.